Austin, Minnesota, October 7th, 1915.
Well, what kind of environment did you grow up in?
Well, my father died in the flu epidemic in 1918, and it was very difficult for my mother to keep us all together. There was, but when I was about 12 or 13, my oldest sister got us all together and rented a house in Fort Dodge, Iowa, so we could all be a family again. And then about a week later, the market crashed, and then my brother lost his job and my sister lost her job, and so they sent me to live with my uncles on a farm. And I had to hitchhike there, and it was about 80 miles. And the first night I slept in a covert, and the next night I got there after dark. But the spookiest part was that the last part I had to walk about 3 miles maybe down just a little country road. And every farm has got a big dog. It was dark, and every driveway I come to, every dog was out there barking, wanted to tear me apart. But anyway, I made it. Oh, there was no jobs for anyone. In the area were very, very few. People had, little grocery stores and stuff. Most of them survived. Some businesses didn't. But no, it was very difficult. And I had learned a little about farm work, and it was a hard life. But everybody helped each other during harvest. When they cut their grain or something, that everybody would come and shock and help you thrash. And there was just, and you help somebody else. But it's hard to describe. But then I was about 15, I think, and I and another kid, we took off and we just bummed the countryside for 4 or 5 months. And we worked in the fields, and we worked in barns and anything, because a lot of times all we got was something to eat. Nobody had any money. And I know we could work in grain fields sometimes, and you were up at about daylight. And by 6 o'clock you had your breakfast, and they give you a gallon jug of water. It's wrapped in burlap. It's wet, and it keeps it cool. It's surprising how cold it gets, just from evaporation. And then about 10:30 in the morning, there'd be usually young girls or some would come out in the field and give you a new jug and maybe a sandwich or something. You go in for lunch, you had about an hour off, and then you went back in the field, you worked until it was almost dark, and then you went in. And the food was good, that was good, a lot of good food. And, it all fit together. We used to sleep in the yard or in a barn, and we went all over. We finally went up in Memphis, Tennessee, and it's the first job I ever had, and I got on the painting crew. And there's a lot of big old mansions down there, and so I always got to paint all the high windows and all that sort of stuff. I was the smallest guy on the crew, and there was a whole bunch of jungles. That every town had one if a railroad stopped there. It was always the edge of town, and there was probably from 10 to 20 guys there, every night. And they had a big pot, and they would cook. But you had to contribute something. You had to go in town and beg for food or work for food. But fortunately, we always had a little money, maybe $1 or $2, so we could go buy something and come back and put it in the pot. What was the difference between bootlegging and prohibition? In the bigger cities, there was mafia and gangs, mobsters, Al Capone, and people always associated with them with bootleggers, but they were mobsters. And like Capone took over Chicago, and if you didn't agree to buying his beer or whatever, they'd kill you. They didn't matter, and they had a lot of protection. But they didn't have bootleg whiskey or alcohol or anything, because they had smugglers that brought it in from Mexico, and Canada and all those places. And it was good. It was good liquor, good whiskey and gin and all this. Bootleggers, and the term comes from they sold alcohol in little half-pint jars, and they wear big boots, and they had 2 or 3 of them in their boots and long pants on, so that So, but it was a matter of survival. There was everybody knew about the treatment of the Jewish people, all that sort of stuff, and this country couldn't stand by and let them run over France and Belgium like they did in World War I. And they almost destroyed Britain. It was horrendous what some of the things they did in bombs. But I was in the Army for about a year and a half, and well, until my daughter was born, and I was still in the States, and they didn't expect Ag to live. She was very, very serious, and Mary Ann was born with a heart defect. Her father was dying, and there was just a lot of turmoil, and so I don't know how it happened, but the Red Cross tried to find me down in the swamps in Louisiana, wherever, but they couldn't, and then they did, and they got me out of the Army to maybe come back, because at that time the war hadn't been declared yet, but at that time, if you were over a certain age, you had children or a family responsibility, that you could get out, and so I couldn't see myself staying in the Army and worrying about my wife and the kids, and all. So then I went out, and I was called back 3 different times, and then they canceled it. One time I had rented and we were getting packed and ready to move my back to Stillwater, and then they canceled it. And then another time I was in line ready to get on an airplane or something, and they came and pulled me out. But I had went to a technical school and learned about resinous products, paint, plastics, and things of that nature. And I had a pretty decent job. I was a foreman in a plastic company. And there was very, very few people who knew anything about plastics. We would do a lot of war work, and a lot of this was precise and a lot of expensive dyes. And so they sent me there, and I stayed there all throughout the war. It was great raising 8 kids, and I had never been around small children or around a little baby in all of my life, until I married my wife. And so, but she knew all about that. She was a good mother. And raising a family is a lot easier because in those days, and partially because of depression, neighborhood people were a lot closer. Mothers didn't work; they were home. They knew the neighborhood children and the neighborhood mothers, and they all helped each other, mothers and families, and so it was and they made a lot of lifelong friends. It was a different atmosphere, and there was gangs or juvenile. There wasn't any crime at all. Well, probably the best thing I ever did was join the Catholic Church, and a few years later, I was for about 45 years and where I was an usher in the church. And I think one church is pretty much like the other. They all have their beliefs, and they all have the same goals and stuff. And I had a lot of friends, we were through the Ushers Club. And you get involved in, we used to sell Christmas trees. We've done all kinds of things, for the church. And we had a lot of good friends, and our children had a lot of good friends. And so I was, we never wanted for anything. I could have used a better car now and then. But you may do with it. I'm proud of everyone, and they all, in the various stages of whatever, and they're all successful.